After Tomorrow Never Dies, EA wanted to deliver their next Bond experience to fans on several different systems. Early on, the goal was to release a version of the game on the PS1, N64, PC, and the upcoming PS2. The PS1 version was going to be created by Black Ops Entertainment. They were responsible for the Tomorrow Never Dies game on the PS1. For the N64, Eurocom was going to create that version, and they had some experience with first-person shooters from their N64 version of Duke Nukem. The PC version never came to be, and the team that would later be known as Visceral Games was working on the PS2 version that turned into a completely original Bond experience. Join me as we take a look back at The World Is Not Enough for the N64 and PS1. With Tomorrow Never Dies, EA focused on delivering PlayStation's first Bond experience. But with The World Is Not Enough, EA wanted to provide the action from the film to different consoles. As such, versions of The World Is Not Enough were being made by different developers for the PS1, N64, PC, and the upcoming PS2. The PC version eventually was cancelled, and the PS2 version eventually turned into a completely different Bond game. The plan from the outset was to have games that were curated to take advantage of the system that they were released on. Eurocom was aiming to make a new first-person shooter for the N64. At the same time, EA was looking for a developer to make a Bond game based on the recent film at the time. Eurocom heard about this opportunity and showed EA their engine and what they had been working on. EA was impressed with this and offered Eurocom to make a first-person Bond game for them. Eurocom accepted and started to get to work on the adaptation for The World Is Not Enough on the N64. Eurocom felt it was important to incorporate other elements into the game to provide that expected James Bond experience. There would be a large focus on shooting, but also opportunities for stealth and gadgets. As such, features were added in for non-lethal ways to take out enemies, through the sleep darts, the taser, and the stun grenades. This fed into the goal of including a lot of variation into the game. Mission objectives were aiming to include rescuing hostages, bugging enemy phones, protecting allies, and a lot more. The aim was to provide different situations to keep the action fresh. Eurocom wanted to have their game be highly replayable, and they looked to GoldenEye for inspiration, as that game had changing objectives based on the difficulty. Eurocom planned on continuing the legacy left by GoldenEye to include split-screen multiplayer. This time they wanted to provide the option for AI bots to be included to enhance the experience. During development, Eurocom potentially wanted to include a playable version of the exciting boat chase from the opening of the film. This was one of the bigger action moments from the film, and they wanted to touch on this area in the game. As development progressed, the studio realized that to do this section justice within their game, Eurocom would need to create a separate game engine to even make this possible. Since most of the gameplay was set to be focused on first-person action, the studio opted to focus on making sure that this area received the most attention and had to drop the boat chase from being playable. Now at the same time, Black Ops Entertainment, the studio that made Tomorrow Never Dies for the PS1, was making their own version of The World Is Not Enough for the PS1. Just like the N64 version, this version was aiming to cover action moments from the film and including different gadgets for Bond to use. The developers opted to include the grappling hook, a Q-Lab rocket launcher, along with many others. Black Ops Entertainment were able to store a good amount of video on the PS1 disc, so they opted to show some of the action sequences from the film to bookend many of their levels. It was also decided early on that they would not have any form of multiplayer on the PS1 version. The developers wanted to focus on trying to provide the best single-player experience they could. A big change for the PlayStation version was how this one was going to be a first-person shooter rather than being played from the third person like in Tomorrow Never Dies. This was an interesting time since two different versions of The World Is Not Enough were going to be released on different platforms. In the fall of 2000, The World Is Not Enough was released to the world. The The world is not enough on the N64 revolves around first-person shooting. There are a few sections that help to change up the action, either through some rail shooting, swimming, or stealth, but for the most part the levels are very forward-moving, and provides more of a roller coaster type experience. Do not expect the level of exploration that GoldenEye had. The gameplay is very similar, but the level design is very different. A majority of the levels provide a fun, linear type experience where you are completing objectives and shooting enemies. And while the game is very much more linear, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game holds your hands all the time. The objectives are generally less vague than GoldenEye's, but you still need to look at your inventory and figure out what to use to complete your objectives. Selecting and using the gadgets is easier as well, and I do want to praise that some of the levels allow you to take some more freedom in your approach. There is a stealth section that has you avoiding guards and silently taking them out to proceed. While not the most open level, I do like how it has a much slower pace compared to the other levels in the game, and requires a different approach to complete it. The level following this is set in a forest and it's an action-packed level, but there are a few different paths to take, and honestly this level reminds me of something ripped right out of Medal of Honor. And lastly, the level following this has you being in a disguise and allows for the tension to build before the action really kicks off. The entire game is more linear and direct in its approach to the established GoldenEye gameplay, and it's pretty solid the whole way through. I do think the game would have benefited from having a few levels that had more player discovery and exploration mixed in with all the linear action. But either way, the action is still pretty good and holds up pretty well. The shooting again relies on an auto-aim system and allows for you to manually aim to go for headshots. The auto-aim feels a bit more improved from GoldenEye's auto-aim, and for the most part it works like how it should. You get a nice selection of weapons from different pistols, rifles, a grenade launcher, a crossbow, a shotgun, and many more. The shooting has some nice gun sounds along with solid impact. The weapons sound deadly along with the enemies reacting to your hits. They will fly back if you hit them with a shotgun and have some very entertaining contextual deaths depending on where you kill them. Since this is a bloodless game, this sort of stuff helps to provide that satisfying impact to your shots. Another thing to make note of is how the weapons feature more detail than before, along with some nice reload animations. In GoldenEye, when you reloaded, the gun would just go down. In The World Is Not Enough, you get some nice specific weapon reload animations for each of the weapons. Each of the different guns will have an optional attachment or rate of fire that you can change. You can add a silencer to your pistol, or turn on a laser sight, or change an automatic weapon into a burst firing gun. This sort of stuff gives you more options to the player on how you want to choose to use your weapons in combat. Gadgets return as well to provide you with more options and help to complete your objectives. You have a multi-purpose watch that can stun enemies, hit them with a sleeping dart, shoot a laser, and create a grappling hook to get up to higher levels. There are other cool gadgets as well, like the X-ray vision glasses and a pen grenade. You can now jump in the game, adding a little bit more verticality to the levels. The levels do a good job of creating a sense of urgency through its objectives, like defending your base, pursuing an enemy, or trying to deactivate bombs. Essentially, The World Is Not Enough takes the established gameplay from GoldenEye but puts it more into a more direct action setting. This creates a more linear experience that is delightfully short and sweet. The World Is Not Enough does feature having additional objectives depending on the level of difficulty you choose, along with additional unlocks to earn. This game showed that another developer can come in and take an established formula and deliver a quality campaign. I really enjoyed some of the improvements to the presentation, from the included voice acting, along with some nice destructible items in the environment, from glass to shooting posters. Like I said, the campaign is a solid experience, and in many ways it gets overlooked by the original GoldenEye, but The World Is Not Enough is a solid shooting experience that any Bond fan should check out, especially for the multiplayer. While I think GoldenEye has the nostalgia power, The World Is Not Enough's multiplayer has better presentation with the inclusion of bots for that mode. I was able to load up the multiplayer and have a blast playing it without needing to coordinate with any of my friends to get a game going. This was the first time that bots were included in a Bond title, and it's greatly appreciated here. The multiplayer is an absolute blast even to this day. It comes with a decent amount of modes, from Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, and a few others. You can also select which types of weapons you would like to see in each of the matches. The action is pretty fast, and I enjoyed how many of the maps allowed for some verticality to them. The solid multiplayer, along with the inclusion of bots, is why this still can be enjoyed to this day. The multiplayer rounds out the entire package very well. Overall, I had a good time with The World Is Not Enough on the N64, but I did have some flaws with it. For the most part, the game will let you mess around in the levels if you do not want to follow the objectives. But if you fail the objectives, the game will pop up a font on the screen telling you failed. This is really annoying and hurts the potential replay value of the game because this font does not go away at all. Some of the do not kill civilians or ally objectives can be way too stringent in this game. In GoldenEye, you had some leeway in these types of objectives. You could still kill a few innocent people without failing, but in The World Is Not Enough, you can easily fail your objective even if you accidentally shoot an ally. And sometimes an enemy will be standing right next to an ally and the auto-aim will target your ally. This area needed more playtesting and improvement to make it better. It can cause needless frustration that doesn't really add anything of value to the experience. There is also a lack of damage indicators for the player. In GoldenEye, you would get pushed in the opposite direction of where someone was shooting at you, and your health would pop up on screen to indicate that you were being shot. In The World Is Not Enough, your health is always on screen and there is a slight nudge when you get shot at, but it is too subtle to tell where you're getting hit from. This can be really annoying and cause needless damage to the player because of the game's failure to provide enough information to the player. Then there are a few instant fail parts in the campaign that boot you right out of the level and do not even allow you to play around in it. The World Is Not Enough on the N64 does have some speed bumps that can hinder the experience, but it gets enough right in its campaign, along with providing fun shooting and a solid multiplayer that makes it a quality title to play. The PS1 version of The World Is Not Enough is made by the same studio that made Tomorrow Never Dies. This game is an improvement over the prior Bond game, but it still has its problems and creates a mixed bag of an experience. Like the N64 version, this is also a first-person shooter. The game is even more linear than its N64 counterpart, with a combination of shooting enemies and using your gadgets to complete objectives. The guns have pretty good gun sounds and impact to them. The enemies die in over-the-top ways and react to you shooting them. My favorite part about this is how you can shoot a gun right out of their hand. You get a decent arsenal of pistols, shotguns, a sniper, and some automatic weapons. You also have your gadgets like night vision glasses, a cell phone stunner, and more. The gadgets are more used in very limited capacities for certain moments. The mission objectives range from chasing a target, defending a target, collecting stuff, and reaching the exit. Generally, the shooting is pretty fun, the guns are fun to shoot, and I like the enemy deaths. The problem with this version of The World Is Not Enough is how you are fighting the controls to just move. The biggest problem with the movement system is how Bond moves like he is on ice. This makes all of your movements imprecise and you will find yourself not being able to be in the right position to select an item or even open a door. You are fighting the controls every step of the way as you are moving. Along with this, the enemies can rip right through you rather cheaply, meaning you will die a lot, and part of this is how the enemies do way too much damage and the movement that is really imprecise for the player. Paired with all this are the inconsistent body armor pickups for more health. The game is a lot better than Tomorrow Never Dies, but these developers needed to implement more improvements to make it a more enjoyable experience. There are parts that are rather fun, and then something annoying pops up that kills the fun flow that the good parts created. Then there are other things that just add to the annoying factor to the game, like cheap enemy placement and even a part towards the end of the game where you need to get out of an area quickly before you die. Again, this feels extra cheap because the movement is so imprecise. There are good parts like some of the shooting and using some of the gadgets, but on the whole, this is a lesser version of the game and a mixed bag of an experience. I give the developers credit for making a better game than Tomorrow Never Dies, but this game has its own issues. Along with all of this, there is no form of multiplayer here. If a multiplayer was implemented, especially with bots, this could have been a great game to play and potentially really make me recommend it over the campaign. But there is only a brisk campaign here, and it's both fun and very frustrating. Between the two versions, go with the N64 one. The World Is Not Enough on the N64 is an underrated first-person shooter. This title is easily forgotten about and can be eclipsed by GoldenEye. While The World Is Not Enough was not a groundbreaking FPS, not every entry within a franchise needs to be, along with it being unrealistic to expect that with each new entry. This game is a solid first-person shooter, like GoldenEye holds up very well and is one of the best first-person shooters on the N64. Where GoldenEye provided more player discovery and exploration, The World Is Not Enough provides a more direct action experience with a good amount of level variety. Along with this, it delivers a great multiplayer experience that is enhanced by the inclusion of bots. Sadly, the same cannot be said for the PS1 version. The World Is Not Enough on the PS1 is a lesser game. There is still some fun to be had with this version, but it suffers from many frustrating situations that hurt some of the good moments within it. When it comes to The World Is Not Enough, the N64 version is the better game and one that deserves your attention even to this day. If you haven't played the N64 version, I highly recommend it, and only try the PS1 version if you want to experience how different it is. Thank you very much for watching.